everyone, and welcome back to Lisa at the Edge. It's so good to have you here. Today, we have the first episode in a new series that I am kicking off here on the channel, and I'll be running over the next few months. We're going to kick it off in March, the month celebrating International Women's Day. And in this series, I will be joined by women in pre-sales and similar roles from across Dell Technologies, to ask my favorite question: how did you get into tech? How did you find your way into tech? And then we'll discuss careers, challenges, successes, share experiences and learnings, and hopefully they will be useful to some of you. So today I am super excited to have Maria Mohr with me, and let's bring her on and get some introductions underway. Hi, Maria.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
I'm really good, thanks. I'm so glad to have you here. Very excited. First episode, buzzing.
So congratulations on being back.
I'm back. Before we get started, please tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your role within Dell Technologies? What are you doing just now in your role?
Yeah, so my name is Maria Mohr. I've worked with the company for 10 years now. And in all of those years, I've been within the pre-sales organization. My current role is I'm leading a global technical community focusing on sustainability. So how do we have conversations around technology and sustainability? And I have some great colleagues leading other communities, technical communities around AI and cyber and so forth. So it's a really interesting role that puts me at the center almost between customer conversation partners, the field, our colleagues, and then the innovations that's happening, the more of the corporate governance that's going on as well. So being in this really interesting sort of field, I'm almost looking at it like a matrix. Is very exciting. But previously, I was an account SE for all of those years beforehand.
Yeah, sustainability is a really cool and evolving area, right? It's still people are still trying to get a handle on it, define terms, etc. So really cool to be. Yeah. So let's get stuck into it. And I'm going to ask my favorite question that honestly, I'm just so happy to be back speaking to people and asking this question. And I know we had a little bit of a prep call, so I know a little bit what's coming. And I love your answer. I love your answer already, but tell me a little bit, right, about how your journey into tech started, because you didn't sort of start out wanting to be in tech, right? Which is always the best stories. I love them.
No. I thought when I was a kid, I thought I was going to be a designer or a lawyer. And then I moved towards thinking I was going to rule the world of fashion. That was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a brand manager. I wanted to lead all of these things.
Yep.
And my bachelor is actually based on international sales, brand management, focusing on retail and fashion industry. But I was coming through my education during the financial crisis in 2008, and that was impacting. So I came out not necessarily to a job, and was working a little bit and trying to figure out what was next. And I had a very good friend of mine who had begun her master's at the IT University of Copenhagen on a line called e-business, and she was like, "Maria, it's great. There are 3 mandatory subjects, introduction to e-business, introduction to law, and introduction to coding, which was C++ at the time. And the rest is just elections. You can completely color your own masters." And that just ended up me falling into this area of enterprise architecture, and I loved it. But from not necessarily from a technical solution perspective, but much more of a, what does technology do? How do we incorporate it into business? How do we take a 360 perspective on it? What's the holistic approach to this? And it just sort of led the way, and I ended up writing my master thesis about it. And then I came out and we're like, great, I don't know what I'm doing next. And I applied for all of the consultancies and everything. And I would always have really good conversations with the managers, but HR would look at me and be like, I don't understand. I don't understand your profile. It's not a classic profile. You're not coming straight from Copenhagen Business School. What are you? So I was struggling a little bit with that. And then the same friend who had introduced the IT university to me, she was like, "Hey, I just got offered a graduate role at a small, well, not small, but unknown at the time, at least to us, a company called EMC. But I've already signed my IBM graduate contract. So I've sort of given them your name, saying you're a little bit more business oriented than I. Do you want to maybe have a chat with her? And I was like, yeah, definitely. And then I had the best conversation with the HR representative. And we basically agreed I was not fit for the role. I was not technical enough at the time.
Okay.
And but it was the best conversation ever. I've never had such a good conversation with a recruiter before. And she was like, I think you should still have a cup of coffee with the manager. And then I think a week before I went in for the interview, which wasn't an interview at the time, it was a coffee conversation. They was like, actually, can you do a little bit of a personality test? Like, what is happening? And then it turned out to be more of an interview than an actual coffee conversation. And I went to the next second interview, and they gave me, so back then we were doing certification in ISM, infrastructure storage management, and they gave me a CD-ROM. They were like, can you go home, have a look at it, see if you somehow get this or find it interesting. And I remember coming back to the second interview being like, I think RAID is a great concept. And I had no idea what it was because I was just getting introduced to it. But one thing led to another, and I ended up doing my graduate program and spending 8 weeks in Boston, which was one of the most amazing experiences of my life.
That's so cool. I love the fact that so originally you were either design school or lawyer. I can relate. I didn't know if I wanted to go to dance school or become a lawyer.
No, exactly.
And then also it was interviewing for a graduate scheme. I interviewed with Thales. So I also graduated around that time when everything was a bit tough. And so getting a traineeship as a solicitor here in Scotland was difficult. There were people offering unpaid. That was not an option for me. So yeah, I ended up also interviewing for a graduate scheme and also had the best experience ever. I remember just kind of going in and absolutely smashing the interview process. I didn't really know what was going on, but I kind of just was able to bring my full self. And it sounds like you were really lucky in speaking to that recruiter who could clearly see that something in you was a fit or would be good for the type of role, and then kind of still brought you through that process. That's amazing.
So the experience was very much that from where I sat was that the HR representative and the manager at the time were very linked up in terms of the profiles they were looking for. So with her sending me forward, the manager was giving me an amazing opportunity and did say, listen, we are looking for skills that are normally that are new to what we are usually looking for at the time within pre-sales. So he did know that they were taking a little bit of leap of faith as well in terms of hiring sort of an atypical profile. But he was like, we need to have more soft skills, presentations, business outcome led, which was how I approached IT anyway from the previous experience. So but there was a good collaboration between the manager and the HR representative, that's for sure.
Awesome. So you landed your graduate position within EMC. That's your first foray into pre-sales. When we were discussing it, we came up with the term, you were just thrown into the pit of pre-sales, right? And it's kind of like sink, swim, survive, and then kind of figuring out what you want to do. And you've been on that journey for a decade, right? And we spoke about this, and we actually shared similar things. We came into these roles and we thought, I won't be here. When I first joined Dell and I joined like a quarterly business update, I saw people, 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And I thought to myself, no, I will not be here that long. I'll be 6 years this year. And one thing that like kind of really struck out to me was that you said, so you originally found yourself, if I am not mistaken, kind of in the commercial side of things, but the commercial side of the business, but with your skills and your master, etc., you were really looking to work more within that enterprise space. And you had some really good interactions with women in business who saw that you should be here, but you just needed to find your the right place, right? Can you share a little bit about that experience and what you went through?
Yeah, it was such an interesting time. It was at the same time where the merger was happening with Dell. So there was a lot of changes going on anyway. There was also changes going on in my personal life. I was going through a divorce.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of sort of like things were not going to be the same. And then my then manager and I had a very good but honest conversation of acknowledging that with the changes coming, the profile I had was not necessarily fit for that team anymore or for commercial sector. Because what I'm good at is the more strategic, is the long term, is the relationship building. And that was just some of the parameters that was the facts at the time. So I was experiencing a lot of like, okay, what now? And then I had been really lucky. I had some mentors through work and also outside of work. And at the same time, I had done a presentation a few months back with one of our directors within pre-sales, a female director who were asked to lead the UK pre-sales team as the merger was happening. And she called me after we had done a presentation together and we're like, hey, do you want to come to London? And it gave me an absolute amazing opportunity at a point of time where I felt a lot of doors were closing on me. And what I experienced was that the doors were open, new doors were open for me by women. Like it was the female mentor who said to me, Maria, reach for the stars. This is the time. This is now. You reach for the stars and you go there. And I had several female friends who were like, just go. And I ended up spending 7 years in London, and that has been one of the most impactful experiences of my life, for sure.
Yeah. And I love that. I love that people around you were, and this kind of really points to how important it is, right? The people around you, when these moments happen and you are in turmoil, change, etc., you need people around you who tell you to go for it. Because if you have people around you who potentially project their own insecurities or their own worries, or they wouldn't have the courage, or they just can't do these kind of things, that can really have you doubting yourself, and you can miss these open doors, right? You can miss these opportunities. So I love that story, and I think it's an important one to share.
And for sure, from a personal perspective, I was definitely leaning on that support system because I was going through some personal, probably a crisis at the time, and having something to lean against, and knowing that support system just I didn't even have to ask for it; it just stood there. It has been such a giving feeling, and something I'm trying to make sure I'm incorporating in my own life now as well, to give back to others, right? So
And the next thing that I actually love that you said was, so over those next 7 years, you found yourself being a little bit like a raven and kind of just going after the next shiny thing, right? And I suppose as well, taking that mentality of walking through these open doors, right? If they are opened by people who know you well and you trust them and they have your best interests at heart, then why not, give it a chance? And so, talk us through sort of a little bit the highlights of those kind of 7 years and kind of to where you are now in your career.
Yeah, so I think if you had asked me when I was even 18, maybe even 22, probably even 26, if I were planning to stay with the company for more than 2 to 5 years, I would have laughed at you and said, no way, that's never going to happen. So when we spoke about the Raven thing, is what I realized that in average 2 years, there has been moments where it's gone a little bit faster, a little bit slower, but every 2 to 2.5 years, I started to become like, okay, what's next? How can I keep developing? And that has sort of created this sort of current of conversations and, not necessarily being very active or proactively thinking about that's what's happening. It's just sort of a pattern I have.
Yeah.
So some of the very good managers I've had during those 10 years have understood that that's how I work. And have seen some of the behavior I've exhibited, and they've been like, okay, we need to figure out what's next for her. And then presented me with new shiny things, and supporting me in different endeavors of like being more active with women in action in the UK, and being able to develop some leadership skills there, or skills I thought I was maybe not developing within my current role, or ambassadoring me into projects like the Excellent Project, or there was a number of things where within those 7 years I got so much support. And I feel really lucky that I've had such good managers. So yeah, they saw that I was starting to be a little bit restless, and they kept presenting me with new ways of keeping my interest at bay.
Yeah. I can kind of relate to that kind of rhythm, although I definitely, and this is something I have actually spoken about for the last year or so, I need to be a little bit more proactive or active. I have just gone after and basically what I enjoy, and then I've done that to the point that I'm enjoying it, and someone else sees, oh, you're doing this over here, can you come and do that here, but in this slightly different role, right? That's kind of what happened to me within Dell. I came in a different team, and then I came into specialty pre-sales to basically do what I was doing in that role, but more with customers and teams, and spend sort of more time with the sales community and our customers and partners, which I love. But I definitely... I don't have, we spoke about this. I don't have anything close to a 5-year plan. When someone asks me, I get very stressed out because I can't even remotely imagine 2 years or anything like that right now. But yeah, something we discussed about is, I liked what you said about getting involved in whether it's external projects or ERGs within Dell, etc., to build skills that you're potentially not building in your role. And I think that is something, even just from our little pre-chat for this, that I've kind of taken on board. I think that I definitely need to do something like that. And I actually think that me coming back to this channel is a little bit like that. I'm kind of like, right, what else do I need around my role to have fun, have joy, connect with people? And I think going after and doing things that you enjoy and you're passionate about, whether they are directly related to your role or outside, is a really good way to create that rhythm, right? And those connections, and then those doors, etc. I think that's a really good way. So if you're someone that doesn't like the idea of a 6 month, 2 year, 3 year, 5-year plan, it's okay. Just think about what are some of the things that you could be doing that could be beginning to create this kind of rhythm around you and potentially open doors in the future. So yeah,
what's curious, like what's spiking your curiosity, right? And I'm with you, Lisa. Like I remember this very vividly, right? I'd been in London for maybe a year or so, and I had a very good friend, still a very good friend of mine, and she was doing her 5-year plan.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, should I be doing that? Why am I not doing that? Like, I was already moving country, and like there was a lot going on. It wasn't necessarily, and I had been paired up with a great mentor at the time, and she and I sat down a few days later. She just looked at me and she was like, Maria, do you like a 5-year plan? I was like, no, it gives me like I get like it's not great. Like it's proper giving me stress.
Yeah.
So she was like, okay. So let's figure out, like, there's ambition here, there's drive, but what does it look for you? So I've always been working with like elements of like, I thought program management was interesting, or I thought, stakeholder management was interesting. Like I've been working with themes, and what I ended up realizing, because I'm quite visual, when I'm just how my brain works, I almost have like an island on the other side, and I have all of these stepping stones, and each stepping stone represent something I'm testing out, like, or is it ready yet? And sometimes those stepping stones will come up and be like steady, or they will disappear and be like, again, no, this is not what you're doing right now. You have too much going on. So each time I've been like having conversations with colleagues, or areas of interest, and was almost about to leave pre-sales at one point, but sort of ended up in last minute not doing it. Just because it didn't feel right at the time.
Yeah.
It was like that conversation, that path was a stepping stone of like, hey, can this hold me? Is this, because there is an island over there and I can see the outline of it, but I'm not sure what it entails, instead there's some personal and professional ambition, or, hopefully some sort of way of living that I would like to have in the future. But for me to get there, there are these things, and it's a little bit of leap of faith sometimes testing them, but for me it's a better way of working, and it rather than having like an Excel sheet or a Word document or whatever. So but I do find that the methodologies that we are getting around the CDP is helpful for the conversations.
Yeah. So next thing I want to ask is a little bit about challenges, right? Mm-hmm. What are some of the challenges that you've faced in pre-sales, in tech, as a woman in tech and a woman in pre-sales, as moving countries, right, etc. There's definitely, so one of the themes that we came up with when we originally discussed this was around communication, definitely also having to deal with like culture shifts, right, in communication, and also struggling to feel, how do I stay authentic? How do I stay authentic? And also, especially as you get further on in your career, how do I show authority, expertise, etc., whilst remaining true to yourself, etc. So talk us through that, because you had some really, again, good experiences with mentors who you were able to work with early on in your career to give you some tips and tricks, and then kind of how you've taken that over the last few years. So talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think from communication is really one of the key themes underneath it all. So I started out at a time where I remember in the Danish office that we were 10 women out of 100, including the 2 receptionists.
Yeah.
And it felt like a family, and it was great colleagues, but culturally it was dominated by, the way that men tend to behave in group, and that's just a fact, right? That's an organization, it's culture. You can't really do anything about that. So for me, there was a space to understand. Partly I was a lot younger than the others. While I still turned 30 at the time, I was still, young, compared across. Yeah. And I was also female, and I was also an atypical pre-sales. Like my profile didn't stick. I hadn't come from IT admin. I hadn't done anything that was heavy coding. Like I was not even representing STEM probably in like an educational perspective.
Yeah.
I'm sort of like a fake engineer, if you will.
I can totally.
Yeah. So for the first experience of a challenge I really experienced was how can I be myself? How can I be respected in the field that I am, while I'm also being a female with however I communicate. And I had some great managers at the time who were having those conversations with me. But it's been an ever, coming back conversation. And then when I moved to London, it became apparent in a different way. I thought, moving at the time, UK was part of the EU zone. And I thought moving to another EU country, it's fine. Right? I speak English. I know the language.
Yeah.
And then after about 9 months, I had come out of several customer meetings and meeting with account teams, and I've been like, oh, so we're doing X, Y, and Z. And they would just be looking at me and saying, no. And I was like, what? But they said, I have it like on the notes here.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, but didn't you notice the emphasis on this? Or, they were sort of mentioning that, or I was like, no, what are you referring to?
Because you expect people to be quite direct.
Yeah, but also the words they were actually saying were,
actually,
that was actually what the notes I've been doing. And then, so I went to my manager and I was like, I need to speak English, but I need to speak culture. Like, I don't understand what's going on here. This is creating too many obstacles. So I basically put my manager on a hunt for a mentor for me to navigate that. And I was paired with the mentor I mentioned previously around the 5-year plan. And what we ended up doing was basically cheat sheets, because I needed almost like a way in, or like a ski slope, or a way for me to communicate to customers or colleagues that I was potentially now going to be a little bit more Danish in the way we are communicating, so a little bit more direct, which I found was a very rude word. So I couldn't, even just using the word direct was a learning in of itself. It was a little bit more to the point. So having these, so I would start to say in meetings, if we were going through like big projects that just needed to be like executed, or we really needed to move forward with things, or the conversation had stalled, I'd be like, I'm going to be a little bit Danish now. And then everybody would be like, oh, okay, that's okay. You can do that. Yeah, that's fine. So there was a huge learning about the audience, not just understanding personality types, but culture and how we're communicating, but how I show up when I'm communicating. And I'm still learning that, especially now also moving into a global role and working with all kinds of stakeholders, internally, externally, and across the regions, which is, I find really exciting, but I feel like it's a new iteration. Like I did the first iteration in Denmark around female and male dominated, came to the UK, that was a culture around countries and communication in of itself. And now it's, okay, how do we navigate globally, culturally, process, organization-wise, which I think is really, really exciting.
Yeah, and that does take effort, because I notice when I get really busy, I will forget that. Because when I get really busy and I'm jumping because I cover EMEA, I can get pulled into any customer, any size of customer, any kind of opportunity that's to do with my specialty area. And so I can be, in and out of lots of different customers, which, there are pros and cons to that. But sometimes if I get really busy, I will forget that, because you do need space and time to kind of take a moment, figure out, okay, how do I need to amend my communication skills? It's funny, if I meet people from Dundee who I don't see regularly, they say that I sound very different, because I have to speak slower than I would normally. And I find if I am busy, or I'm getting stressed, or even excited or frustrated, I'll speed up, and kind of all of that, falls to the side. So it's a skill in itself to build, and it does take time and energy. And I think some people are better at it than others. But yeah, I think working across a global team, that must be, very interesting.
It's very interesting. It's very exciting. And I think every day is almost like a learning day still.
And that actually brings me on to the next question, which I also loved your answer to. What do you love about your role and the industry? And it was this kind of mixture around learning, working and learning, and kind of that fast-paced change. So share with us a little bit about why you love the industry and why you love the role.
So I think one of the reasons why I've also stayed in the industry, and why, for instance, I was attracted to the fashion industry to begin with, is the pace of it, is the dynamics, is that you have to keep on top, like almost like a season. And I think at where we are now, what we're seeing in the market is the same approach. Like we almost quarterly have to be, which means you have to be, where are we maybe 12 or 18 months from now, but at the pace we're working in, you cannot even maybe predict that to the same extent that we could a few years back. So for me, there is this underlying attraction in the industry that you have to be on top. Like you have to keep learning. There's something new all the time. And I've always been, my parents always described me as somebody who was curious to understand what's around the next corner. Like I always wanted to be like just a peep. I didn't need to go around the corner, but I just wanted to know what it was that was going on there.
Yeah.
Other people might call it FOMO, but I'll call it like I like the visual of looking around the corner.
Yeah.
So that was one thing. And then for years, because I had been like working in retail and I've been then studying and then back and forth, and every time I had been maybe 3 to 6 months into either a full-time work or studying, I would start to get bored. I would be like, if I was working in like, my brain is like, it's not getting stimulated. I need something. I would read tons of books because I was like, I need the intellectual feed.
Yeah.
And then when I was studying, I'd be like, but how do we apply it?
Yeah.
And then when I came into, I fell into pre-sales, like more and more people do these days.
Yep.
I realized that for the first time, I had found a field where it was expected that you kept learning and you kept applying it.
Yeah.
And I had never had that experience before. So for me, that has been one of the foundation of why pre-sales always keeps bringing me back, is because there is an expectation that we are knowledgeable. And that means you have to be curious, you have to learn. Yeah. And that does speak to something that's just one of the who I am, of the cornerstones of me. And then how do we then apply it? Because then you get other learnings that you then get, the experiential stimulation from. So yeah, that's the sort of the two elements of it.
And I love how you described it as it's kind of like we go through seasons, right? And you had kind of linked that to fashion, right? Everything, but there was something new each season. And then we spoke about but how after a certain amount of years, fashions get recycled and they get a new take. And that is actually can so apply to the tech industry. I remember when I first got into tech, I read a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. I actually listened to it on Audible. It's a really good listen. I'm sure that each new chapter starts with a rap lyric. So I was enjoying that. And I remember listening to it and they were talking about it was the shift they were making between basically moving to a subscription model for purchasing software. And I just thought to myself, wow, so we've been here before. We've done this before. And that I definitely, coming up for 6 years at Dell, but being around now in this industry for 10, 12, slightly more years. And I have seen that even in the decade, we are seeing things come around again, shifts from, you mentioned like outsourcing to bringing it back in-house to hyperconverged infrastructure to disaggregated infrastructure to cloud to, well, maybe let's have some kind of hybrid cloud. But it is that constant, let's do something, let's learn, and then let's reapply. So yeah, exactly. I love that.
I had a lecture at the IT university, and I remember it so vividly. I don't know, it just made an impact. And it was not a necessarily interesting subject at the time, but he said the IT industry, the pace you're seeing is centralization and decentralization. Yeah. And that's the two mechanisms that we keep working in. And up until this point, I've never seen anything else. Like it is those like, if you look at it from maybe a little bit more of an outside in perspective, much more meta-like, it is, are we centralizing things or are we decentralizing it? Are we doing it from a multi-cloud perspective or are we doing it down on a solution perspective? It's the same mechanisms that's happening. And for me, I'm like, okay, so this is just another round. So it's not just another round, but it's like, okay, so now we've learned all we could here. We are now moving into the other phase and we will come back again. And that's just how it's going to work. Yeah.
I love that. So final question from me is, what advice would you give to women or anyone looking to enter into, whether it be the tech industry or specifically pre-sales? You had like 3 key points when we were talking, and I love them. So I definitely want you to share those. So I think the first was around building a trusted network, which I really loved. And as we had a little chat about that, it became apparent, and even just reaching out to do these episodes, that is something that I have neglected, and that is because of things that I have gone through over the last few years. I've definitely like pulled into myself. We do that. We do that to protect ourselves, for example. But that is definitely something that I feel like that might even be a reason why I started to, reach out again, because I feel like I am needing that as well within my workplace. So talk us through building your trusted network, what that looks like, and how it can help.
Yeah. So for me, there are three things, right? So we'll just line and then we'll walk into it. So the trusted network, it's probably one of the most foundational things I've found, not just in career, but in life as well, in my personal life. The other one is, which we touched on a little bit earlier, around, how do you build skills outside your day-to-day job? If you know there's something you're interested in, is there projects? Is it volunteering outside of work? Where do you build some of those skills? So your day-to-day job sometimes for a period of time may not be completely 100% everything you're trying to achieve, but where can you maybe then build yourself? What can you own? Because your career is your own. And then the last one is, I can't remember it. What was the last one?
So I really like this one.
Oh, yes. Being needy.
And honestly, that is something that when I heard, I thought, yeah, there's nothing wrong with being needy, right? As some people might label it, but making requests of managers, right? And your leaders and people who are there to support you, making requests of them to support you. And that is something that, I found really almost validating to hear, actually.
And that was when, for instance, when I came to the UK, I needed to learn some of the cultural aspects. I didn't know the company in the UK. I didn't know all of the people. So the only way for me was to, and luckily I had a very good relation with my manager and a very trusting sort of employee sort of conversation. So it was a good space, and I could say to him, listen, I need your help. And I've had managers after that as well, where I've been like, I really want to do something about X. I don't know whether, studying or something else might be. And then we would start to, brainstorm together. But I would have sort of a sense of, not necessarily a solution, but I would always be like, offer a type of solution, not an end result, but of saying, hey, I need to learn the language or the culture. I don't know. I think a mentor would be right. What do you think? So having that more of a dialogue, but essentially it is because I'm needy. I'm like, you as a manager, potentially the especially when you're a little bit earlier in your career, you may not have the whole stakeholder network, and you may not know who your potential mentors or sponsors or advocates are yet. So how do you navigate all of that? The primary person for you is your team, but it's actually your manager. And so asking the manager to help you with that, I think, is completely valid, because otherwise, how are you going to grow in your career and can get the best as well from you as a team member? But the trusted network, if I'm coming back to that has been, I've had multiple mentors. I've had people who've been acting like mentors. I've never officially said that they were, but for me, they were trusted go-to people. And they would all be of different kinds. Something would be very sort of, specific to the work, or it would be understanding and navigating maybe some of the organization and how I did, and also a space where insecurities can be talked about, because let's be honest, a 10-year career at this point, there has been insecurities, and there's been a lot during that time. So having that trusted space of people personally, but also in professionally, either inside of work or other, previous managers who've moved on or whatever. Those are, I think, are key. And then definitely, building those skills outside of your current role is something that can keep you motivated as well in your current work, because you then start to apply them. And then finally, don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid to be labeled needy, right? That's something that really sticks to me. Something I get really frustrated with is when you are asking for like the bare minimum and what should really be given from people into certain roles, and you either are not getting it, or you're made out to be like you're asking for too much. That is something that, like, on a deep and personal level, just like I struggle with anyway. But it's I really liked how you framed that. Like, don't be afraid to be needy. Like, these are the managers are there to support you. And if you don't, because this happens, if you find yourself in a spot where you don't have that trusted relationship, and it is a bit more of just like line manager day to day, that's okay. Try and within your trusted network, find other people that you can go to and ask for help. Yeah. And that's the other thing. You have had very clear asks. Anytime someone asks me, what can I do for you? And sometimes I find leaders and managers will ask that at the end of the call. And sometimes I will get the vibe that they're asking it because they just know that that's what they're meant to say. And there will be others who will ask it, and you know that they are being genuine, and you could ask for them for help. Every time that happens, I panic and I don't know what to ask for. So even just having this conversation and knowing that other people have asked, and it's that's been really helpful to me. So that's definitely something I'm going to take on board.
And Lisa, I'll be completely transparent with you. It sounds like my ask to whoever it was have been very clear. Before that, there has been a process in terms of how I work. I need to have a conversation with somebody. I need to have a little bit of a brain dump, and then I will start to process it and it will clear out. But up until that point, my brain will just be very chattery, and there will be a lot of scenario planning, a lot of options. So I need to have a conversation with somebody. I've grown to learn, and I'm still learning on it, of how I can do some of these things myself. So when I prepare for very important meetings where I know I'm speaking to leadership and stakeholders that could be quite impactful for the work that I'm doing that as part of my preparation now. But in terms of, for instance, career, where I'm now in a role that I've been trying to work towards for the last 4 years, starting conversations of what's next, I think it's daunting, because I just really want to do well with what I'm doing currently. But we're also working in an environment across the industry where career is a conversation point, right? So having some sort of, not necessarily opinion, but starting again with those outlines of what could be interesting, what's sparking your curiosity, I think is the one. But it's just to say, sometimes because I remember when I was younger and early in my career, I would watch podcasts like yourself. People would stand there and there would be these amazing, usually women, and who would be quite transparent about their career work, but they'd be like, oh, and then we did X, Y, and Z. And I was like, but I need a process before then. Usually I probably need 3 processes before that are necessarily not clean, quite messy. So I just want to make sure that as part of this conversation too, that, there's so much before being able to be very clear.
Yeah, and that makes me feel better, because I love a brain dump. I need to have a brain dump, and then I need to process. And it's just finding people that you can do that with, right? And then knowing what situations you can do that in, and what situations you need to go and prepare that either by yourself or with some other people prior to going into a certain room or a conversation. Yeah, I love that. Well, this has been amazing. I'm so happy that this has been my first episode. I'm super excited to continue this series. I think I have, again, coming back to having the support of leadership, etc. I had talked about this with Ross Porter, who now leads the specialty pre-sales in EMEA. And we kind of I was saying I really want to get back into my YouTube, and I wanted to connect more with the other women in pre-sales, and because of where I am and how specialized I am and quite niche, sometimes that's not that easy. And I think we've come up with a list of something like 10 to 12 names, and I actually found myself adding names to that list in conversations with you and just other conversations. And so I'm just really excited to be reaching out to all these different women within pre-sales and Dell. Hopefully they'll join me on some episodes. We've got a few more lined up. So first of all, just thank you so much for being here.
I really enjoyed it, Lisa. Very, very much.
Awesome. And thanks to everybody for watching. Please tune in, because this is the first of, who knows at this point, but at least another, 10 episodes. So subscribe, and we will see you in the next episode. So thank you so much. Bye.